Yes, we should go live in about 30 seconds. Cool. So welcome to episode 12 of the Oh So Spurs podcast, where today we have a special guest, Scott.
Hey guys, how are you?
Well, thanks, Scott. We've got Deej.
Hello.
And Jonny.
How's it going, mate?
Scott is a football coach in Spain, and he has some really good insight into some of the managers that Tottenham have been linked with today. So what we thought we'd do is a bit of a different format. We're going to go over the favourite candidates for the job, ignoring Thomas Tuchel for obvious reasons. And we're going to have a little bit of a think about what Tottenham could look like under each of these managers, both tactically, but also in terms of whether they fit the structure of the club. So, Scott, I thought we might start where you're based, so starting in Spain. Luis Enrique, what's your understanding as him as a coach? Like, he's been very mixed feedback from Spurs fans. Some desperately don't want him. But what's your view on
him? Enrique is, I suppose, like, we can look at the tactical side of things. There's a lot of questions to be asked. I mean, we just spoke about it before we started here, was like, you know, what's the roadmap, the plan, the identity for the club? Because you're linked with so many different names, and it's almost quite frustrating how different all of those names are. In terms of Enrique, like, if you look at him over the last 10 years, he's obviously been at Roma, he's been at Barcelona, most recently Spain. Straight away, he's appealing, I would imagine, because he's available and he's openly said he's looking for a new project. For me, I think he's one of the best brains in the game. He's kind of a professor of the game, really, quite theoretical, likes to put it in practice. He chases perfection. If you watch with his Spanish team, the way they played, he constantly evolves, and that's what I like about him the best. Is like, even recently when he was with the Spanish team, he had it where they were training. He had little microphones in their training vests, and he would communicate from the sideline so that they would hear him in his ear the whole time. Like, he's constantly looking to evolve with the game, which is quite exciting, and why I'd kind of pay a lot of attention to him. The way he plays is very positional play, kind of based on certain concepts and ideas. And he's very of the Barcelona, the Cruyff, the Pep, that kind of school of thought. And he's always been he'll openly say he basically will teach players to problem solve. He'll give them solutions to problems. And then as soon as they're on the pitch, it's up to them to do it. Quite principle-based. For me, I don't know if he would suit Tottenham. Just because, to start, the players you have, what he would look for within a team. I mean, if he was to come in, he's a brilliant manager, but it's going to be an even bigger rebuild under him, which I think the club needs. And then again, succession building. Like, we're going to talk about De Zerbi, and you look at Brighton and how good they have been at succession in terms of playing and coaching staff. I think if Enrique comes in, whether he's there for 3 years or 6 years, where's the succession to someone who is in a lot of ways very unique? You know, his style, the type of player that he's going to want, I don't know if you have many of them in the squad. And again, there will be a lot of patience required for his style of football. If we look at his Spanish team in the World Cup, I thought they were one of the stronger European sides. In the Euros before that, I arguably thought they were the best team in the Euros. They lost to Italy, I think it was on penalties. And they have a really clear identity. But again, that comes into, with Spurs, what's the identity? Do you know, like, what are we trying to build moving forward? So, like, if we look at the kind of key components of a system that he'll use, when he was at Barcelona, he obviously had that famous front three of Neymar, Messi, and Suarez, and he was able to adapt to that. So he played with two inside forwards, but his principles within the game never changed. With Spain, he didn't really have that out-and-out centre forward. He had Morata, but he'd play with two number 10s. And you kind of go, well, where would the two number 10s come in your squad right now? Who would be playing there? And how that would look. And then he plays with a single pivot. So he had Busquets, or maybe he had Rodri in there, who also played as a centre-back for him. Who would take that position up? So as exciting as Enrique is, I mean, from what I've heard, is he's Parachi's kind of first choice, but is that just because he's available and he's won the Champions League with Barcelona and he's managed Spain and been like, is that just square peg for a round hole sort of a situation where it's not, there's no real thought to it? That would be my opinion now. And then like the type of player he wants, they have to be quite intelligent. I hear you laughing there, Johnny, but I'm kind of looking, particularly like he played Rodri at centre half in the World Cup for Spain. He's playing a centre midfielder back there because he just wants to dominate the ball, and he sees it as when Pep left Barcelona, he went and studied chess for a year, and he, like, if you watch Enrique, he basically sees the football pitch as a chessboard. And like that is very much all about the collective. And I just think if he was to come in, there's a massive, massive overhaul. And that's no disrespect to some of the players that are there. There's some very good players there, but I just don't know if he's the right fit straight off. And I love him. I think he's brilliant. He's very much about the collective and not the individual. He's available. But out of the 6 guys we're going to talk about, he'd probably be my last choice for what Tottenham need.
What do you think about the impact that he has and the length of time it takes for him to come in and stamp his authority and make his impression on the players and establish a system? Is he got what's his record like in the different teams he's worked with?
I think one thing that would work for him is it's almost like it's a bit of a holistic approach where he's going to inform the players. He's going to make them more intelligent. They will improve in his style, which, and no disrespect to Conte. Conte was brought in because he's a manager that wins and is successful, and now it hasn't quite worked out to this point. But he's not coming in to develop players as such. And I think you've kind of seen that with some of the players that have maybe not gone backwards, but have just kind of plateaued a little bit. Whereas if Enrique comes in, I think players will buy in very early and they'll go, okay, this guy's got great ideas. He's a serious thought about the game. He knows what he wants to do. There'll be some strong intrinsic motivation within the players, which, I mean, was it the Southampton game? Was it when Perisic scored against Southampton, didn't he? And then came, like, even when they scored, it was like, we scored, but there was no brilliant kind of moment. It's like motivation has just been drained out of that squad. We're not behind the scenes, so we don't see everything. So I think it's very harsh when we try and put it on one person or one manager. We don't know what's going on there, but I think from what he's done before, I think he would really intrinsically motivate the players. But again, it's it could be 1 or 2 steps back to take 3 or 4 forward, and there would be a lot of patience required.
Interesting. Well, that probably goes alongside the thoughts of a lot of people who weren't very much for him. I was a little bit more optimistic that he might, there were concerns that our midfielders would need an overhaul because they're just the wrong fit. And weirdly, that's gone to become a really strong part of the squad. And it would actually be a shame to have to offload, Sarr, Skip, Højbjerg, Bentancur, and these players were all starting to really enjoy a really young core of midfield anyway to accommodate him. But we also feel the likes of Kulusevski, Kane and Son might find a whole new lease of life under someone who did such great things under, their Barcelona time with Messi and Suarez. So, yeah, it is what it is. So, does anyone else have any questions on Enrique or before we move on?
What would you see as if he did come in, where would he need to make what were the key areas that you think he would have to prioritize?
I mean, to be honest, again, no disrespect there. Anyone that comes in as centre half and your goalkeeper is
exactly.
The problem is, and I agree with what you're saying with the midfield. If you look at some of the other guys that are linked, pretty much all of them except for Postecoglou play with a double pivot. And your squad at the moment is set up for a double pivot. Whereas with Enrique, you're going to have to go out and get a couple of 10s. Like, you don't really have that creative, interchangeable, rotational player. And I know, like, this word rotations is thrown out all the time with different managers. Pretty much every manager now someone goes and does an analysis, say, oh, their rotations, like what does that mean? Whereas that's very heavy in terms of Enrique. So he will set up a team in a positional structure, but the players are taught to think totally freely within that structure. So you could be playing at 10, but be playing at right wing or center forward, or be dropping into the single pit.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, your positions are, it's a huge, you're 10, you need a couple of 10s. You'll need another, more of a traditional winger. Your center halves, your goalkeeper. I think Lloris has been a brilliant servant. I just think there needs to be something more fresh there.
Yeah.
I think I think he himself probably needs another challenge in the later years of his career. And that's not it. Like, he's been brilliant for Tottenham, absolutely brilliant. But it's like eventually everyone has their day, you know, and I think his is maybe coming to an end.
Mm. Yeah, good points. Anything from you, Deej, before we move on?
Nothing, no questions or anything. I just wanted to add on because I know Enrique has been linked because he's at the top of the Paradici's list, but I've been looking, and apparently there are reports coming out of Italy that we're trying to get rid of him with Conte. So just from everything that Scott said, that sounds like a good thing, because I'm done with round pegs and square holes, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I agree. And there's also links coming out now that even though Conte's only got 2 months left in his contract, he'll still cost 15 million to remove due to a clause that he negotiated into that. So we really had Levy over a barrel when we got him. So that points even further to an interim manager. But let's see. Next on the list, I think a lot of people are interested to hear, is a name that came out of nowhere quite suddenly a couple of days ago. Is it Oliver Glasner, if you pronounce it with an English accent? But do you know much about him, Scotty?
You know, he's out of the list. He's the one I'd probably know the least about. A little bit about from praying and hoping last year he would do a job in the final of the Europa League to help me out. He's an interesting background. He's worked with Ranić, and he was Roger Schmidt, who's now the Benfica manager's assistant. He's been linked in the last couple of weeks with Real Madrid and Chelsea, and apparently he's on their shortlist as well. Now, the media say a lot of things, so take it with a pinch of salt. I think it's one of those, he's been successful. I'd say he possibly feels he's gone as far as he can with Frankfurt and wants to change the next step for him in his career. So that could just be his agent whispering into people saying he's on different shortlists. I think he potentially suits the squad in some ways. He traditionally would look to play a 3-4-1-2 or 3-4-2-1. I think with him, his identity, he's an interesting one because from what I've seen, they play quite a direct game. His style of play is hard to sum up in one sentence, but if I was to try, I'd put you on warning and say he's probably more defensive minded with a counter-attacking approach, which are we just moving one out for one in? Now, not so much in terms of the Conte and the Italian, and not to generalize all Italian managers, but you know, that kind of approach, it is a little bit different. They are quite direct. Centre halves, it's an interesting build-up. His centre halves, they play with 3 centre halves, and they play quite flat and quite narrow, and they look to use the goalkeeper, but they play with wing-backs, but very attack-minded wing-backs. So in transition, they are caught quite often in behind because of that. Out wide, I mean, if you look at, obviously your system has been brought, like Perisic has been playing wing-back. He's been quite creative for you. I know there's mixed reviews on him. I think he's got your highest assist this season. I think Perisic, you know, maybe it would suit him a little bit. He likes to be unpredictable. He has no one set way of scoring and creating goals. Even set plays, he's quite inventive. They play quite a narrow, organised kind of counter-attacking team. again, I just don't know. Is he the guy that's going to come in and excite Tottenham fans? Is he the guy that's going to unite them and kind of go, right, we're going to get back at he's here for 4 or 5 years. Again, is he one that, okay, well, he plays similar to what squad we have, so maybe he's a good fit, but do you want to suit the squad you have, or do you want to go, right, we need to build on what we have right now? It's a difficult one to call. I mean, you guys know more than yourself, like how Tottenham fans feel. Outside looking in, look, he could come in and be very effective. He's competitive. He is a very competitive manager, and he's had some very good results. I think they're 6th at the Bundesliga at the moment. Obviously winning the Europa League was brilliant to get to the knockout stages of the Champions League. But I don't know, is he the guy that's going to excite you and kind of go, here's the culture change that we need? Because we can talk about I think it's culturally is where you need the big change.
Yeah, I agree. We're like overly fixating on things like, oh, we've got a few young wing backs, we want to protect them and get a manager in who can utilize them. But like you said, the last 3 managers have all highlighted an issue with our culture, and it's going to take a big, vocal, strong-minded person to change that, and someone who's patient to do it over the space of 3, 4, 5 years, knowing what they've signed up for.
Yeah, and I think it's more, he likes to play with inside forwards. He plays with a double pivot, and you're kind of just going, all right, well, he could play there and he could play there. And for me, it's just, that is short-term thinking. And again, that's no disrespect to him. He's done a brilliant job at Frankfurt, and he will get a move somewhere else. I'd say his agent is doing a lot of talking as well, and it might be reaching out the other way. Again, that's just me speculating. But again, you've gone from the 6th, what I would have put as the 6th choice, to then the 5th choice. I'd be interested to see who you ask me to name next. But he's good, but I don't know that much about. I just don't know if he'd be the right guy for Tottenham.
Is he a young manager?
No, I think I'm aware.
Late 40s, I reckon, early 50s. Yeah. So really young, Jonny.
Oh, spring chicken. Yeah.
Okay.
I guess he was at Wolfsburg before Frankfurt, wasn't he? And he got them into the Champions League places. I think, did they come 3rd or something? Which is pretty impressive.
He's been successful, definitely.
Yeah.
Quite pragmatic in the way he plays. But again, I feel you need that. I feel you need that character that's going to walk in to the room and suddenly everyone's eyes are on him.
Yeah, definitely.
You probably have 1 or 2 of them in this list, which is makes me very sad potentially. But I think you do have 1 or 2 of them in this list.
Yeah. So let's try guess the 4th choice. Your 4th last choice, Scotty, is the next one. What about Ange at Celtic?
He's not my 4th choice, but he would actually be my 2nd choice for you guys, and I hate to say that. And again, like Enrique, he's a single pivot, so slightly different. Again, I don't know if you have that in there, but he's brilliant from what I've seen. So I'm a Celtic fan, so we have been quite obsessed with him since he's come in. He came in as an unknown quantity. I think the big thing for Ange is whether he's going to feel he can achieve more and go on and create a bit more of a legendary status at Celtic, or is he kind of go, okay, I've learned a lot in my 2 years here. It's been brilliant. He'd be loved if he walked away at the end of the season for something else. He'd be wished well. And then is he going to go, right, I want to take the step into the Premier League, which I think is going to happen. I mean, there's always been whispers that, because we got him through the City group essentially, and that Man City rate him quite highly. Liverpool apparently rate him quite highly. He needs to be tested more in Europe, I would imagine, for them to maybe go for him. In Europe, for us against Real Madrid, I mean, for 45 minutes, we seriously went toe-to-toe with them at Celtic Park. When we played them, it was just individually, they just have seriously quality players compared to us. His style of play, I think he'd probably be, in terms of a character for the media, for the club, I think he would be culturally the best person you could bring out of the list. He has, and I've met the guy, I've been in a room with him, his aura when he walks into a room, it's like it kind of feels like, your dad just walked into a room when you're a kid and you just worship the man and you crave his attention. and he's so humble as well. I mean, he's so down to earth. It's interesting, the last couple of months, there's been a lot of talk about how he deals with players. And I think this might suit Tottenham in terms of if they want to bring him in, he'll want to build a legacy there. He seems to be quite not standoffish with players. He's close to players, but he doesn't approach them. Like, he seems to be a bit of a psychological genius in terms of that, as the players crave his attention. He'll speak to them when they need to be spoken to. He has a lot of respect. Like, he rotates his squad. We have a big squad. He rotates the players, and we don't really have any issues. We lost Juranovic to Union Berlin in January, and before a bid even came in for him, he had a replacement lined up, and he's quite good at succession planning. We've obviously brought in quite a few players from Asia under him because he knows the league so well out there. Now, whether they're the quality to go and play for Tottenham, I don't know. They've not been tested at that level. But yeah, and then in terms of, I mean, the guy has such an identity in how he plays. He hard-working, high press, really aggressive, really brave. He plays with inverted fullbacks, which is something for me as a coach, you'd seen a little bit, but I have totally adopted from him. Again, if you're looking at player profiles, he likes a 4-3-3. Your fullbacks probably have to be the most intelligent players on the pitch to understand what he wants to do. And then your centre halves, and he said himself, it's the hardest position to play in his system. So if he comes in, again, there's your rebuild where I'd say the first thing he's going to address is your back four. The other thing I'd say is he doesn't quite play with 10s. He plays with 2 8s more than 10s. And he's very high on rotation, but they're quite set rotations. It's not easy to understand, but he delivers it in quite a way where I think he'd be able to work with most players. He likes forwards to run in behind. He likes to play with wingers nice and wide to keep the width. Technically, he likes players to be of a very high standard. One thing I love about his game is he's really big on quick restarts. So if you watch us under him, particularly when we're at home, it's almost like he brings the ball boys into training, because as soon as the ball's out of play, the ball's back in. Joe Hart has been brilliant for us, particularly in his first season. As soon as the ball's out of play, somehow Joe Hart has another ball in play straight away, and he's very brave. I think Ange is only going to get better, and I think if you guys don't take the punt on him, someone else is going to, and I have absolutely no doubt that it's going to work out for him. Again, he just gets everyone to buy in. I think when he came in, Rangers had obviously just won the league. I was at the Cup semi-final in November, and obviously we haven't won anything under Ange at that point. I actually think we were still second in the league, possibly at that point. And I mean, the whole of Hampden is singing Ange's name as if, you know, he could never leave us. He'd break our heart. Like, I think culturally he would be absolutely fantastic. He's probably number 2 on the list in terms of what I think we should go for. But yeah, he's, and trust me, I don't want him to go. I really don't want him to go. But yeah, I think if it's not you, someone else is gonna take him.
I think, yeah, the obvious problem is, and I've spoken about him a little bit before on previous podcasts, and it's like it just comes down to the fact that he's a manager of a Scottish team, and people just kind of immediately write him off on that basis, which I think is incredibly narrow-minded. It's understandable, but anyone, like, I'm not a Celtic supporter, but he's amazingly charismatic and really impressive figure. And I think that, yeah, it's interesting what you said there about his engagement with the players, and that he's a bit distant, but sort of plays psychologically. He has a kind of masterstroke with the players, so that's quite different from Pochettino in some ways. But I kind of like, I would look at and what I know of him a little bit like Pochettino at Southampton, and just see like he's doing something. And I know like Celtic are the first British club to win the European Cup. I think just get that in there for Scott. Needs to lay it on the line, but it is a huge club, and I'm not saying okay, I don't want to even make a direct comparison with Tottenham, but like Southampton and Celtic are not the same. What Poch was doing in Southampton, like Southampton are a much smaller club than Celtic are. He was making an impact there. In fact, it was in the Premier League, So Pochettino's in the Premier League, so he's like just a genuine candidate on that basis, which is really, really narrow-minded, I think. And there's a brilliant documentary about Ange, and it's based on his. He's got this mantra like "We never stop," and it's like that is just. It's like what Scott was just saying there about the restarts and like everything, the energy. It's like I would watch the Celtic game if it was on Sky because they're really good to watch. Like it's fast. It's a high press. It's great energy, and you can see the togetherness. I see so many parallels, to be honest with you, between the way the identity of Celtic right now and what it was like under Pochettino, genuinely. And I agree with Scott. I do think he'll go somewhere in the Premier League, and I hope he's given the time. But I just see him being successful, and maybe I'll be proven wrong, but I don't think so. I'd be very happy with him, to be honest with you. As much as I know he's not operated. Maybe, well, I mean, he's Celtic manager. He under a lot of scrutiny. It's a 2-horse race, isn't it? Like that's the problem.
He brought Australia to the World Cup, and he won the Asia Cup for them as well, which is a huge thing for Australia. I think, like with Ange, it's when you talk about how he works with the players. I think a little bit of the problem is how Tottenham have managed Harry Kane from the outside looking in terms of Harry Kane at the moment feels bigger than Tottenham. And that used to fly. It doesn't. If you look at Arteta at Arsenal, anyone that thought they were bigger than the team or the club is gone. Ten Hag's gone into Man United. Ronaldo's gone. There's a couple of players you're kind of going, okay, what's going to happen next? Pogba left before because it just wasn't working because he thought he was bigger. Even if you look at Real Madrid, how good they've been the last few years, Benzema does not feel bigger than Real Madrid because of how they've managed him. Whereas I actually feel Harry Kane's been done a disservice there because there is this talk. It's like, do they need to get rid of Harry Kane and rebuild? And you kind of go, Harry Kane is the second top goal scorer in the Premier League this season. He has still produced the goods. I just feel he needs someone who's going to come in and reinvigorate him. So I think like he might be the right man to do that in many ways. And then when Ange came into us, we just lost the league to Steven Gerrard, who suddenly then gets the Aston Villa job based on the fact that he played in the Premier League. And you look at, then Ange comes in and Ange like had to totally rebuild the team. I think there's maybe one player who's McGregor, I think is the only player in our starting 11 now that was there before Ange came in. Within 18 months, it was a totally new team.
Yeah.
And he was able to so quickly and unite them. So now, again, he has the comfort of, and no disrespect, of not having to play, 5 or 6 teams competing to win the league with him. So he is given a bit more time in that sense. But then again, at Celtic, you're not given time. If the results don't work straight away, you're out of there. Like it's just, I just think culturally he's the right fit. I think there's possibly a slightly more exciting option than him, but I don't know if that option is going to be available is the problem.
Yeah.
Honestly, you had me at rotation. That's...
it's the thing that appeals to me most about him is what you touched on earlier. He's the type of character that comes in and the kit man and him are on first name terms. Like I think when we talk about the issues of the culture at Spurs, we need a modern manager with an old school head, in the sense that, like, what Fergie had when apparently one of the members of staff, his legend is, comes into the training room and says, can you sign my shirt for my kid or whatever, and is essentially kind of ignored by half the squad. He drags them back in and screams his head off at them and says, you respect every single member of this, not club, and you make sure that they all feel a part of this journey, because they are just as important. Making sure that your things arrive on time from their level of service equals more success on the pitch for you. And he had that thing as well about, players turning up in their white suits or whatever it was. And he just said, we've lost the game before it started. Like, he instilled that whole culture around Man United. Yeah. And I feel Ange sounds like that kind of management style, in terms of a leadership style rather, but his management style is much more modern, like in terms of a football coach. So he sounds like a really cool fit, like you say. But we need to move on to the... Go on, sorry.
Yeah, he's very exciting. Definitely very exciting.
Deej, did you want to choose the next? We've still got a few more to discuss. So we've still got Amorim, Pochettino, and De Zerbi. Were any of those, particularly piquing your interest? Any favourites for you on there?
Obviously, I guess let's go ahead and talk about De Zerbi, because I think he is who I would go for if I had the opportunity to pick anyone that's reasonably gettable in world football. I just want to know what your thoughts on him were.
De Zerbi, if I'm Daniel Levy, he is my number one target if available. But the big question is he going to be available? I don't know if he is. And the danger is, if they don't identify that early enough, are you going to go back into that where, you're 7-8 weeks and suddenly you're appointing a manager that is only going to last 3 months? I think with Zerbi, so he's a 4-2-3-1. It's a double pivot. I don't know if you've seen much of him with Brighton this season. So in Italy, he was very successful. In Italy, he is so non-Italian. It's almost, he is criticised. Before he's gone to Brighton, he was quite highly criticised, or people thought, it's kind of this feeling in Italy that amongst other coaches that he just aesthetically wants to look good, but he's not. He doesn't quite know what he's doing. He's brilliant. He's probably the bravest manager out there. I don't know if you know this, but since he's gone to Brighton have the highest possession stats out of all the teams in the league, including Man City.
Wow, I did not know that. That is yeah. Wow.
So if you watch them, even like their most recent game against Palace, he demands his centre halves want to be on the ball, and they have to want to play with the ball. He's kind of, in the most basic terms, his belief is that you draw the press right out, and as soon as you draw the press out, you look to play in behind through the middle. So he'll start off with, he'll use his goalkeeper in the build-up. He'll get his two centre halves, his fullbacks in a little bit narrow, and then he'll play with two pivots. He'll look to play into the double pivot, to play back out, to then create space between the opposition midfield and the opposition defence. And then essentially what he does is he has high wingers, and he has a number 10 and a number 9 who drop in. So your wingers are your highest players. He looks to play in really early and play, in some ways, a concept what we just call very simple, an up, back and through, where literally it's an up pass, it's a back pass, and it's a through pass. And it's just, he does it so well. But if you watch when they try build up against teams that won't press him, he'll just get his centre halves to dwell on the ball and literally walk the ball up until the forwards have to come and press, and then they'll just play it through them. And it's so brave. And when he was
Can you imagine that of Eric Dyer though?
Well, that's what comes in again, is that, your biggest issues when he comes in is centre halves, your goalkeeper, your fullbacks, again, your creative 10. When I say creative 10, you're someone that's fast, athletic, and is going to run in behind and drop in, and maybe more traditional wingers than what you have. But I think he's the most exciting manager in world football right now. And I just think he's been so underplayed.
Would he fit our out and out wing backs? Because you talk a lot about fullbacks and wing backs, and there's obviously a bit of an overlap. So we've got Destiny Udogie coming in from Udinese. I don't know if you follow Serie A much, but he's a really big talent. But he seems this kind of hybrid is more of a kind of crossover between a winger and a fullback. You don't get much defensive strengths out of him. Perisic is obviously the age he is, and he doesn't have the pace to track back if he's high up the pitch, and it often leaves us quite exposed. Then the other side, we've just invested a load of money onto Pedro Porro. So are all those players kind of the wrong fit, do you think, for someone like De Zerbi? Are we going to find ourselves back into the process of overhauling the type of players we've been buying?
I think in some ways you will, but it's interesting with De Zerbi. So his fullbacks, they kind of start wide from the build-up, but they look to play slightly inverted, not totally. They adapt throughout the game, though. He's quite tactically astute. So his players are able to adapt to the formation or setup they're playing against. When he went in at Brighton, obviously he took over at Brighton, who had Potter, who you're kind of going, that's their big shoes to fill. And up until the World Cup, he kind of didn't really change anything. He tried to maintain what Potter had built. And then after the World Cup, he's changed a lot, and you've suddenly seen his own imprint on the team, and he hasn't gone out and bought loads. He's just used the players that have been at his disposal. Now, again, I said it at the start, is that Brighton are really good at succession planning, coach-wise and player-wise. They're very open about it. So they kind of, De Zerbi was brought in because they felt they had the players to play the way he wants to play, which again is something that Tottenham definitely can learn from, I think. But I think anyone that comes in is going to have to make big changes personnel-wise.
Does he mind, from your experience, working under this whole director of football model, though, and just kind of, allowing someone else to pick the players based on certain strengths that he likes? Because I think that's the model. We're in two places, right, Spurs, and we discussed the pre-pod, we were discussing kind of the structure changes that Spurs are going through and some of the challenges, but we're likely going to see Pochettino with a 3-year ban. So there's an opportunity for Spurs to go one of two ways. And this also goes to questions we've got. I'm going to touch on your questions later if you did put them on Twitter, but we've got to make a decision. Do we use this as an opportunity just to bid off the director of football for now and go for a manager that prefers not to work with one? Or do we get another director of football in right now and then, work with a manager that is happy to do so? What's your experience of knowing about that with Brighton?
I think the first thing you'd say is it depends on the director of football. I think there's a need for a director of football. I don't think you can go away from it now. I think the modern manager has so much to do, is that there has to be a really close relationship between the two. And I think that's really important. So let's just say if De Zerbi comes in and your director of football isn't best friends with him or doesn't have a great relationship with him, I don't think it's going to work. I think that it's probably the most important relationship out of the whole club these days. I think you're getting the balance between, okay, someone like De Zerbi is going to go, right, here's the profile of a player I want. We've got a team that can scout. We've got a director of football. Get me a list of players. Let's look through them together and go. I think any manager these days has to be prepared to work with the director of football. Yeah. I don't think you can take a step away from it now. I think there's just too much that goes on in the game. I think particularly with managers, they don't want to be going out and scouting players the whole time. And it's not, they want to be on the pitch. They want to be training, coaching.
Yeah.
Players.
I completely agree. And then when that manager leaves, like when we had Sir Alex Ferguson at Man United, we saw at Arsenal that with Wenger, when those people leave, it's the most challenging job to completely overhaul your structure once again, because you're all based on the abilities of that one individual and their opinions and their philosophies. And they don't leave a lot behind for you to carry on. So that kind of leads to one of our next ones, guys. That is probably the most popular one amongst our fan base because he's available. He doesn't like playing under a director of football, and that's obviously Mauricio Pochettino. Now, it feels weird asking you about him because we've seen ourselves play under him for a long time. And from the Spurs fan perspective, we think, okay, it actually makes sense. He had Walker and Rose. They were wing backs, right? We've now got a doggy coming in. We've got Porro in there. He worked with Dyer, did all right with him. Now he's got Romero, who could replace Toby Alderweireld. So does it make sense? Fine, all he lacks really is that Christian Eriksen type creative midfielder to play behind Kane. But what's your thoughts on Poch?
Yeah, outside in, no. Straight up, no. I think most fans outside of Tottenham would say, no, I don't. And you know what? It's not to say that he wouldn't do a good job. I think he'd come in and do a good job. I don't know. Is it are you going back and is it going to be better than what it was before? There's no doubt he's a different coach. He's gone in and he took what is in many ways a poison chalice with PSG. I mean, not many managers are going to want to touch that at the moment. And he did a decent job with them, but it didn't win the Champions League, so he didn't last. You know what you're going to get from Pochettino. You know more than I do what you're going to get. He's intense, high running return from his players, high pressing, positional play, but slightly different to kind of the Guardiola, Enrique sort of a thing. It's attractive football, huge emphasis on your fullbacks. Definitely lacking that Eriksen type of player. That is going to be between that and a centre half is going to be your number one signings if you go with Pochettino. Even for Pochettino, I don't know if it makes sense for Pochettino to come back in, because if he comes back in, is he still going to have ambitions to maybe go to someone like Real Madrid later on in his career, or is he coming back in because he's going to go, do you know what, this is what I know what I like, and I like what I know sort of a situation? Is Pochettino going to come in and win you the league? Because the most frustrating thing in researching for tonight was that it's this constant talk for the last 5-6 years about top four. I have no idea why you talk about top four. Like, to me, before the season has started, it's that, okay, we're just resigned. Even if you change the terminology and go, right, we want to qualify for the Champions League. Because by going top four, it's like, okay, fourth place is good enough. It's not good enough. And I think if you bring someone like De Zerbi or Postecoglou in, I don't think that's your talk. I think their language is totally different. Whereas I think with Pochettino, I think straight away there's going to be this feeling of, oh, he can get us top four, we can get into the Champions League again, where you need someone who's going to come in and it's going to be, he can win you the league. You want someone who's going to come in and potentially win you the league. And I think you need to get something different. I think it has to be a step in a different direction, whether it's the unknown quantity in Postecoglou, who's going to culturally bring everyone together and he's going to unite the club and give it an identity, or is it one of the more exciting managers in the world, De Zerbi, who is doing so well because people they don't know him. Even like Guardiola and Klopp, they're kind of going, we don't really know what to expect from him, whereas Pochettino, look, he'll come in, he'll do a good job. Most of the players are going to like him. But how long before that gets stale? Because is he going to bring in that many new ideas that he hasn't had before? And I think that's, again, outside looking in, there's a feeling of Tottenham is stale. Since that Champions League final, Tottenham has been stale. It's like Tottenham, the conversation between everyone else is, might get top four, top three. You're never really in the conversation to win the league at the moment. Whereas suddenly Arsenal are there, and Man United in 6 or 7 months under Ten Hag, people are going, they could challenge for the league given another transfer window. Whereas I don't know if that would again, he's a brilliant coach. He's one of the best in the world, in my opinion, but I don't know if it's the right move. That's me personally.
Yeah. I'll ask you as well, Deej and Jonny. My gut is he's the tempting option because he's available now. So we think, again, we divert back to our obsession with top four, which we should probably just let go and stop caring about this season, because 30 extra million quid to the club we are now, that's dropping 120 million a season on players since the stadium reopened after COVID, isn't the be all and end all. Like, one bad signing and that 30 million is ruined anyway. It's gone. It's more about proper recruitment. But he's tempting because he's available now. We've got the nostalgia. We think that he's probably got more chance of keeping Kane happy. And again, this brings it back to this old obsession with the old Tottenham that we probably need to let go of. But like you say, like, I can't. He's a modern manager, but he's not so modern now that he's going to be able to come up with something completely new and change his philosophies and have us challenging. But he would definitely improve us. He would probably get us back to finishing fourth and third a few seasons, and we all feel really good. But then we're all miserable again because we're never challenging for a title. And to challenge for a title in the world of Man City and Liverpool and Man United and now Newcastle and Chelsea with all their money, you have to beat all those teams in one season. And to beat all those teams in one single season at the same time, you have to do something really significantly special or different. What do you guys think?
I mean, my view with Poch, it's like, I think we're all tainted or affected by the previous experience, and we've got like warm fuzzy feeling about so many great memories of how he made us all feel in the football we watched. And I think we have completely lack objectivity as a result. And I mean, football is almost impossible to be objective anyway, but like, we kind of have to try and do that, I think. And maybe Levy is, because you sort of hear reports that he's not 100% bought into the idea of bringing Pochettino back. I mean, again, like Scott said, that's a press. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But I think we have to be a little bit more unemotional about it, because it's tempting to look at what happened before and think, okay, the famous 2 windows when we didn't sign anyone, not building really on when we had the opportunity to push, because it's like Scott's fair in what he says, but at the same time, we were very, very unfortunate with the timing of like the stadium move. Obviously, the last season at White Hart Lane, we were unbeaten at home all season. I genuinely believe that we would have probably won the league the next season if we had been in White Hart Lane. We were the best team in the country at that point. So, and Pochettino built that. So it's fair enough because the mentality of the fans, I think, and it's sort of the media probably perpetuate it, is that we're happy with top four, and even the conversation before we started, we're talking about top four. So I do think we need to look beyond that, and we do need to cup ourselves on, because if Arsenal are on the brink of potential in the league and we were better than them last season, or we finished above them last season, then why should we be limiting our ambitions? And I just think that remember also, like, this last season, like, so Pochettino did kind of bring us to the brink. It wasn't just about top four. He didn't get backing. I think back if you could rewind the clock and you knew if Levy knew what we needed and what was going to happen if he didn't strengthen and support him, then maybe we would have actually got over the line with Pochettino. But after the Champions League final, that there's that moment, isn't there? Like the week of the Champions League final, and he said he might leave if we won the Champions League. That was a horrific statement. That was just, I couldn't believe he actually said that out loud. That was a really, really stupid thing to say. And also the last thing I'd say about Pochettino that annoyed me about, like, and I loved him like everybody else, like, he was a proper man crush. Like, he was just a fantastic individual. Like, I still love him to bits, but he was just as bad as Conte when it came to making changes during games. Like, he didn't make substitutions until 75, 80 minutes most weeks. And he didn't really have that much more of a plan B than what we've been seeing this season, I don't think. So for those reasons, I would be nervous and I would be worried. I think Scott's right. I think we probably need something fresh.
And as well, let's not forget the Man United and Real Madrid flirting that went on all the time. I do think
exactly.
If those opportunities came, But we have got some questions, and one of them is on Poch and Deej. I'll put it to you. See what you think. So it's from Ollie H at Gold Coast Spurs on Twitter. He said, if Poch does return, hypothetically, say the first 2 seasons, no cups, fighting for 4th, falling short in 6th or 7th, how long do you think the fans or board will give him, given the history with the club and it's a second time round?
I think that it's honestly almost unknowable. I think it'd be different if it wasn't Poch, but I think that there's a subset of the fan base who will be almost excited if Pochettino fails at this point, because they see another manager failure as another excuse to get ENIC out, which just isn't the case. Like, ENIC isn't going to leave when a manager leaves. Like, if that happened, they would have left with probably Mourinho. If not Mourinho, then definitely Conte. But that's just not the way this club is run.
Yeah.
If it were me, as long as he's on a long-term contract and there's no flirting with the Reals or the Uniteds of the world, then, I mean, as long as there's a consistent direction, then I'm more than happy to sit back with that for a couple of years, because the squad needs an overhaul. It's definitely started. I want to push back a little bit on the concept that it's basically the same team that Pochettino left, because it's not. But there is a lot of deadwood. There are players that need to be moved on. We need to sell our loan players instead of leaving them to rot on loan, which is kind of as much bad luck with the whole COVID thing as anything else, that we just happened to buy a bunch of players who didn't end up working for us right before the footballing world outside of England lost all of its money. But I think that as long as we see consistent turnover, honestly, a new director of football, I like my directors of football to not have criminal charges hanging over them, if I'm being honest. And just smart recruitment, then I'd take coming in 6th, 7th, even 8th a couple of seasons, if it meant that after that we would get back to where we maybe unfairly feel we deserve to be.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's some good points there. Yeah, we have got one more manager to talk about. After I read about Amorim, we're going to touch on him. the more I read about him, the more exciting he's sounded in terms of the fact that there's an unknown entity kind of part to him that makes him kind of exciting. And he sounds like he's got a personality that also gets the players really, really kind of behind his philosophy, albeit he's not really tested over a long-term period of this to see if they burn out. But Scotty, did you have any time to look into him, and do you have any views on what he's like as a coach?
Yeah, I actually saw a Lisbon game in Lisbon at the start of the season. His journey's been quite interesting. I think he's only 38. I think he's quite young. He would be my third choice behind De Zerbi and Ange. I think again, player wise, he likes a 3-4-3 or 3-4-2-1, and presses in a 5-3-2. I think he would maybe suit players profiles that you have at the moment. But his background is interesting. So he started off in the third tier of Portugal, didn't quite have the licenses. I'm pretty sure the club he was with was fined, and then he had to leave them. And then he ended up at Braga B team, and he was at Braga B team for a number of games before their first team manager was fired. Took over Braga. That was December 2019, and then in February 2020, Sporting Lisbon, after only 10 games at Braga, paid 10 million quid to get him out of his contract. Like, he is really highly rated in Portugal. And then 2 years ago, he won Lisbon's first title in 19 years. And this season, I think they're third at the moment this season. They were second last season. That's against an incredibly kind of reinvented Porto and Benfica. Benfica this season under Roger Schmidt have been so exciting to watch. Porto under they're brilliant. And he's doing well with them, and arguably against probably smaller budgets. He's a very smart manager, really efficient, effective, not new ways of playing. There's no new ways of playing, but he has his own ideas on how things should work. Obviously, Pedro Porro has worked with him before as well. So again, he plays with that double pivot. He plays with inside forwards, wing backs, all suits kind of players you have. He has played with a traditional 9, but he seems to prefer a more kind of fluid 3 up top, playing between the lines. So I think that kind of, if he was to come, and you're looking at Kane, and Kane under Conte has been able to play a little bit higher again this season. But I think Kane learned a lot under Pochettino. So I think that would work with him. Definitely would work with someone like Richarlison as well. Again, just such a fluid front 3. He's very possession-based, but really aggressive. Obviously, they beat Arsenal, so that's another, another reason to bring him in for you guys. The way he presses, really interesting. So he plays with the back 5, and then a 2 in midfield, and a 3 pressing. And it's really narrow. And what they do is they just kind of look to set traps out wide, and then suddenly the front 5 will press one side of the pitch, leave themselves exposed on the other, but with cover in behind. And he just seems to think a little bit differently to what they have been thinking, kind of in more recent managerial trends. I know he lectures in the high performance football coaching course in Lisbon in the university down there. If I was to describe him, I'd say he's very smart and demanding, and that he 100% gets players to buy into what he wants to do. I mean, the effect he had in Lisbon was so quick. I don't think he lost a game in his 10 games as Braga manager, and he beat the likes of Porto and Sporting Lisbon in those games. And Braga they're a good team, but they're from a very small town in the north of Portugal. So he's very exciting, but it's like you said, he's unknown. It's like he could turn out to be absolutely brilliant, or he could turn out to be he suits the style in Portugal, because I think people underrate the serious differences between the styles between all the different European countries.
Well, this is why I'm going to ask a question when you continue on your point here, because we have had a question from @TT Romboni, which is Sai, one of the panelists actually, I just realised, which says, are there any leagues which have an ethos or style that's more aligned to England that make the transition easier for a manager?
I think the thing with the Premier League is there's such a mixed variety. It's very hard to say you have one style in the Premier League. I mean, obviously you have a tendency. Look, most young managers in the game want to play possession-based football these days. The formations vary. Spain is very different to England. Portugal quite different as well. Italy is very defensive-minded. In Holland, they're very principled but aggressive. I think you've such a variety in England, which is why it makes him a more very enticing as a prospect, but also, is it going to work here? Or it's just such a diverse league these days because of the money behind it, really. Like the best managers and the best players want to play in the Premier League at the moment, and that a lot of that is down to money and the exposure and the brilliant marketing of the league. But no, I don't think there's any league. I think you need to think out of the box. Again, he's different. My worry would be for him is he being approached because you potentially have the players to fit the system that he plays? That would be my concern, because then that for me is short-term thinking from the club. Doesn't mean it wouldn't work, but it just means that you're still working on that short-term thinking.
Yeah.
Is dangerous.
Yeah. And that kind of links into one of the other questions we had from @SpursAreGood, and his name is actually SpursAreGood, which he kind of said, which manager would require the least amount of squad overhauling? He thinks Enrique would kind of be a bit of an open heart surgery situation on the squad, but it sounds like what you're saying is Amorim probably slots in terms of with the players we've got quite well in the short term.
I think Oliver Glasner is probably the one that takes the least.
Oh, Glasner, yeah.
Of the squad. I think Enrique would be open heart surgery. It's the best way to describe it. You'd need major changes. And I don't know if the club, the fans, and even Enrique himself would have the patience for those changes to happen.
Yeah, that's another issue. Yeah, and as we're wrapping up, we've got 1 minute left, 1 or 2 minutes left, but there was one more question for you, and I think you've answered it already, but it's your manager again. So what makes you confident that Ange can step up right now to the Premier League? And that's from Honest Spurs fan @Bartholomew Husav. Do you think he could step straight up? You wouldn't have any concerns if you were a Spurs fan? You saw him coming over?
No, I wouldn't have any concerns. I think the thing, I understand the concerns with the Scottish League, but I think unless you see the bubble that is being the Celtic manager, the pressure he is dealing with is unbelievable. He is expected to win every game. Since Michael Beale went into Rangers, the Rangers were 9 points behind us. They are still 9 points behind us. We've only dropped 2 points, and that was in a draw to Rangers. And he's a winner, an absolute winner. He's aggressive. He's on the forefront. He's meant to leave a legacy. I hope it's at Celtic. It might be somewhere else. In some ways, he's already left one. But yeah, 100%. I don't think he's a risk, actually. I just think he'll need time to overhaul the squad.
Yeah, I'm going to get quite bought into him. I'm quite excited by the idea of him now. And we had one more question from our beloved Stu, who's often on the podcast. He's had some unexpected health concerns. So Stu, if you're listening, hope you feel better soon, mate. But yeah, he was asking, are there any clubs that you wear that are successful that don't have a director of football? The silence, I think, says it all.
I don't know, a director of football. I don't even think I'm trying to think of a club that doesn't have a director of football, but they'll have someone else in that place. I mean, it's really just a title at this point. I think we're well past the days of where a manager just comes in and does it, unless you're talking lower tiers. I don't think it really exists anymore.
Yeah, thanks. Well, look, we're at the hour, so we're gonna close it there. But Scott, again, thanks so much for coming on. That was really, really insightful, and I think the list in my head, which I had in order, has certainly changed since this conversation quite significantly. So I'm very excited by any of Ange, De Zerbi or Amorim, and I'm content with Poch. But the others, I'm a bit concerned about based on these conversations, particularly Enrique.
We didn't even touch on Frank Lampard either.
I know, yeah. Or there were some others on that list. I just couldn't.
Or Marco Silva,
Thomas Tuchel as well.
Oh,
Marcus Silva as well. I can't go for
Unbelievable.
another Chelsea reject or an Everton
Yeah.
reject. Redknapp's now on our shortlist of managers as well. Is the only other ones we didn't talk about. As is
Jamie,
Vincent
is that?
Kompany. Yeah, 78-year-old Harry Redknapp playing 4-4-2 for the remainder of the season. And then there's Vincent Kompany. I don't think we had time to discuss him, but my kind of passing thoughts on him are, I wish him all the well. He seems a super intelligent guy, but my fear is of him that if he is successful in 3 years, Man City will be saying, yeah, we'll have you. And then we're back to square one again, which just makes it kind of a pointless appointment, in the same way that Gerrard, we were all put off him when he was doing really well at Rangers. So, yeah. But cool. Thanks very much, Scott. Really appreciate it. Deej, thanks to you too, mate. And cheers to you, Jonny. And I hope you all have a lovely evening.